You're locked into Inception Radio Network, Superior, Wisconsin.
And now your host of California MUFON Radio, Lorien Fenton.
Welcome, everyone, to the California MUFON Radio Show. I'm your host, Lorien Fenton. We're here on Inception Radio Network, my favorite home of my favorite app in the whole world, as you all know. I open every show with it, so please, please, please go there, get your app, and listen to all of the shows here on Inception Radio Network through your app on your cell phone. You can listen to Jerry Pippin. You can listen to Bill and Nancy Burns. You can listen to me. You can listen to MJ at Pang Radio on Sunday nights. You can listen to all the people here, Heidi Hollis. I mean, the list is endless and endless and endless here of amazing hosts at Inception Radio Network. So please get that app and tune in, because we're hot. We are really hot over here at Inception Radio Network. So, wow, let's see what's been going on with me this week, you guys. Oh, I spoke at what is it called? The Church of Infinite Spirit on Sunday. It's in San Jose, California. It was a wonderful experience. A lot of very enlightened people there talking about aliens and good and evil. And so that kind of leads us into what we're going to be talking with our guest tonight about. I have an amazing guest with us here. I can't even believe that he honored me with answering my request for him to come on my show. He's a very busy man and a very important man out there in the world of the Bible, the religion, and he's going to tell us all about it tonight and his feelings about UFOs, religions, and aliens. And I believe I even found on his website that there's a whole page dedicated to debunking Ancient Aliens TV show. So I'm really excited about that. Not that I don't get along with Giorgio. Now, don't start rumors out there, folks, because Giorgio and I do get along. I just have a hard time. Every time I'm in his presence and we're talking, all I can do is stare at his hair. It's just the weirdest thing. It's like I'm attracted to that pile of Greek madness on top of his head. And he's a great guy. But, as we all know, everybody has their opinion about where the aliens are coming from, if they're here at all, if they're real, if they're all in our heads, if they're, whatever. And, MUFON does a good job of going out there and at least trying to categorize and make a database that is categorizing and data dumping all of the sightings that are going on out there. Now, we're going to find out from my guest, Michael Heiser. He's a biblical scholar and author and a Semitic languages expert. He'll be on here in just a few minutes. So, okay, before we get to Michael, I'm sorry, folks, I'm a little out of breath and a little discombobulated. I think that's the word for it, because my Skype has crashed like 6 times in the last 4 hours, and it keeps dumping me off completely. It just goes down and it's gone, and I have to reload, and sometimes I have to reboot the computer. So if things happen during the show tonight, I just want to warn everyone, Michael may be talking to the ethers, and I may be calling into the show. So there you are. That might be what's happening. And MJ is standing by the 888 number, waiting for my call if that happens. So if you don't hear me, Michael, when we start talking here in a minute, you'll know why. It's because I'm madly dialing the telephone. So I just want everybody else to know that too. It's not that I've been abducted or I'm, being sent to another planet or anything exciting going on in my life. I'm just having Skype problems. And you know what it's all about. I can just almost guarantee you guys this. It's because I won't upgrade. I absolutely refuse to upgrade. And that little thing keeps popping up like every second going, you've got to upgrade, you've got to upgrade. So I think what's happening is the little gnomes that run the little upgrade button, they're finally saying, we've given Lorien like a year now for not upgrading. We're going to have to just turn off her Skype every time she decides to use it. So that's probably what's going on, is the little Skype gnomes are getting at me. So that's it. I know that's got to be it. So, one other thing. We are feverishly working on the Teespring campaign to get me to the UFO symposium. I've already lined up some people to do some live broadcasting. I've already lined up a few special guests that'll be in the Insiders Club. I'm going to record some Insiders Club's interviews that I think you guys are going to find very intriguing. And so we've got all kinds of things going to get me there. And the main thing is the Teespring campaign. Tonight, if I can't get the Teespring going because I'm a graphic designer, and so is Bob Tarmac, who is one of the owners of Inception Radio Network. And we can't even get this 10-color thing to happen at Teespring. So if we can't do it, then, there's issues. I don't know. I keep sending in the file and they keep rejecting it. So I don't know what's going on. And I keep, I made it an ESP file. I made it an AI file. I made it into a transparency. I've done everything I can and they still don't like it. So this has been going on for a whole week now, me trying to get that file uploaded. So hopefully I'll have it worked out by tomorrow, because tomorrow is the first day I'll be able to get on the phone and actually talk to them in person and ask them what the bejesus is happening over there. So we will get that Teespring going. So here's what I'm going to ask you folks to do. Check out the website over the next 3, 4, 5 days before my next show, and there should be a banner coming up. As soon as I can get the Teespring campaign happening, the banner will show up on Inception Radio Network, and it'll show you how to, just click on this banner and it'll take you out to my website, which is lorienfenton.com. That's lorienfenton.com, Lorien Fenton.com. You go there and you can click on the Teespring campaign that will be loaded at that website. Right now, the only way you can help me get to these events is through the donate button on that page, or if you wanted to purchase UFOCon 2013 or the Mind Control Summit 2014. They're both up there to purchase, and I'm not, pushing you guys to do that or anything, but if you did buy those, that would help us out too. So, but the Teespring campaign, I'm really looking forward to it because I want one of those t-shirts. I'm going to wear it at the conference. See, that's the whole point behind this. I thought, gee, if I get a t-shirt made, everybody else might want one too. So there we are. So that's the big news around that, and it is coming down the pike. So just hang in there, folks. We're doing the best we can to make it happen. And one last thing before we get to our guest tonight, the Insider Club. You guys have got to really try to get in there and check it out because it is awesome. There are things there on the Insider Club, and when I say things, I mean interviews and events and TV broadcasts and all kinds of things on there. And MJ, you're going to have to help me because I can't find out where on the website I click to join the Insider Club. This has been my problem all along. And I think other people may be having that problem as well. So we're going to have to figure that out. I think you go to member login. Aha, this is coming back to me. It's like one of those dreams. Here we go. Member login, and it's under shows. So you go to member login and you go there and you can join the Insider Club and become a member and listen to some really, really fun and interesting and informative interviews, TV broadcasts, I believe, are up there. There's all kinds of things there for you. So when you get a minute, check it out. That's the Insider Club at Inception Radio Network. Okay. Well, now I've done all my advertising for the night, and I did it really fast. I was talking blah, 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 as fast as I could so that we could get to our guest tonight, and that's Michael Heiser. And Michael, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Oh, wonderful. Michael, I'm so glad to have you here this evening. And again, I want to thank you for accepting my offer to come on here because one of the things about my show that I think everybody that listens to my show on a regular basis knows is, I always say, yeah, maybe they're here, maybe they're not. I don't know, but let's all find out. So, and I enjoy everybody's opinion about it. And there's only three people that I would not allow on my show. And I'm not going to go into that tonight, but everybody that listens to me knows who they are. And it's not who you might think, Michael. It's some of the biggest names in the UFO community because I can't stand the way the UFO community has turned into such a cult. And
Yeah.
I'm not happy about it. I think that it's doing us a disservice. I think it promotes a lot of elitism. And if you don't believe in aliens the way they do, then there's something wrong with you. And there's a lot of problems around that for me. And maybe I'm just a weirdo, but
Well, it becomes a belief system rather than a question.
exactly. And, and I thought that's what I got into this for. And I thought that's what the whole UFO community was about. But boy, I'll tell you what, Michael, I started producing UFO conferences and seeing
Hmm.
the real people, that are up on the stages. Those are the people I was dealing with, not necessarily the crowds that come to see them, but more who they are. And I was flabbergasted at the backstabbing, the lying, the cheating, the things that go on, the womanizing. I mean, I could go on and on and on about the things I've seen that I was flabbergasted. I had no idea
Yeah,
these people were like this.
I've only had one experience sort of behind the scenes helping to organize an event, and I don't have any trouble believing what you just said. Let's just put it that way.
It's
And that was only
absolutely
once.
Yeah, it's absolutely mind-boggling, and I still do it, but now I'm a little more selective in who I actually bring in to speak at my conferences, and I bring people that nobody knows about. I don't bring the top names, and I have my all of my detractors, as they say to me, Lorien, you're a fool. You'll never make any money, and I've never made any money off anything I've ever done. I always break even or lose money. I mean, that's just the way things go for me. But I am
Sure.
sticking to my principles, Michael, because I think the people out there that have real stories to tell are the people that I bring on my radio show that, not all of them, but, a good portion of them have never been heard of by anybody before. And they
Hmm.
have had these experiences. Now, whether they equate them to dealing with God or dealing with aliens or dealing with whatever, that's fine. But it's their story and it's coming from their heart. And to me,
Right.
that's so much more important than somebody saying, hey, I did all this research. I've never seen anything. I don't know about anything. I've done all the research. I've got a book. Buy it and listen to my radio show and buy all my stuff. I mean,
Right.
I'm just going, what? And how much disinformation is out there, really? I mean, you think about it and you start paying attention to what these guys are saying, and it makes you really wonder if they weren't hired by some evil entity's cabal to get in to the whole UFO workings and throw everybody off all the time.
Well, one of the blogs I follow is UFO Trail with Jack Brewer. I don't know if you're familiar with that blog, but I would highly recommend it. And he has several pieces up there that now 40, 50 years after the fact, like the Betty and Barney Hill case, people involved in that episode in some way, and the whole alien abduction phenomenon, at least at its inception, at its beginning, actually turn out to be, connected to figures in MK Ultra and things like that. And, it might take 40, 50 years after the fact, but what you just mentioned, that's actually, come to light, where you have people embedded in the whole subject area, the discipline that really they're getting paid, to do what it is they're doing.
Exactly. And it's very interesting you just mentioned MK Ultra because also, as all of my listeners know me and they know me well, I also produce the mind control summits. And
Hmm.
I firmly believe that there is a huge aspect to this whole alien communication thing that is being done by the Black Ops government. Totally believe that. And it's becoming more and more apparent the more I dig into it. So, Not that there
Yeah,
weren't
I
ever
would agree.
some type of extraterrestrials here, whether they were fallen angels or they're reptilians or, whatever. Not that they ever weren't here or aren't here still. But I think the majority of what's happening now is through these black ops programs, what they call MyLabbing and things like that.
Hmm.
I don't know
Yeah.
if you agree with me totally on
Well,
this, but
I think that the whole UFO issue, and of course the alien abduction issue, it's not a complete synonym with UFOs, but it obviously overlaps, and the same thing with the ancient astronaut stuff. You get into this, and one size doesn't fit all. I mean, you're never going to come up with an explanation that accounts for every situation. But in the case of abductions, I do think that programming, mind control, whatever phrase you want to use, just messaging to perpetuate a message. I think that has a big part of it. I think it has a high degree of explanatory power. I wouldn't say it explains every person's story, but I would agree with you. The further you get into this, and you start seeing some of the overlaps of people and programs, it's hard to resist. Not looking at the connection and saying, you know what, if this were the case, this really explains a lot of things.
exactly. I agree with you on that. Yep. There's a lot going on here that people, and sometimes it's more simple than people want to make it out to be, isn't it?
Hmm. Hmm. Well, again, to reference Jack Brewer's blog UFO Trail, he has a whole series on like Leah Haley, who was deeply involved in abduction research, and now she's just gone 180 degrees and really tracked down the MyLab angle to this, and that's where she's at right now. And of course, she takes heat for that, but she's just being honest. She's going where the evidence leads.
Right, exactly. Oh, I'm gonna have to get a hold of that person. That's Leah Haley, huh?
Yeah, Leah Haley.
Lee Haley. It's a woman?
Yes, her last name is Haley. And again,
Okay.
if you go up to UFO Trail and you search Jack's blog for her name, Leah is the first name, Leah Haley, you'll find, again, a series of essays. And Jack really does a good job just laying out where Haley where Haley is at, where she's been, and sort of her story, what led her to really flip on this issue.
Wow. Interesting. Very interesting. Well, boy, I'll tell you what, we got a lot we got a lot to talk about tonight. I can tell you that. You know what we didn't do, Michael? We just kind of jumped right in like we were jumping into quicksand together. We didn't even tell anybody who you were and what you're about. I don't read bios about people. I like people to tell the world about who they perceive themselves as. I think that's more important because, I can read all kinds of stuff about your Ph.D., a doctorate, I can read all this stuff, but what difference does it make? Why don't you, in your own
I'll
words,
wake
tell
you
us
up.
who you are?
Yeah. I could wake you up when you're done.
Exactly. That's why I don't read them anymore. Exactly.
When I start hearing you sawing logs, I'll know when to interrupt you. Well, I am a biblical scholar by training. I have a couple master's degrees in ancient history, Hebrew Bible, Semitic languages, and then a Ph.D. from Wisconsin that I finished in 2004. I actually got sort of involved in all this stuff before I was done during my graduate program, actually. But what I do, my normal job is my job title is really highfalutin. I'm the scholar in residence for Logos Bible Software. I actually like the title. My old title used to be academic editor, when I used to always have to explain that to people because I didn't actually edit anything. It
Oh,
was just
okay.
it was literally a title they made up, when the day they hired me. But what I do there, it's a software company, and we do ancient language databases. We digitize lots of books, a lot of scholarly books, but a lot of trade books too, that quote unquote normal people would read. I like to refer to them as the non-specialists because I don't want to be thought of as abnormal. So we do a lot of stuff that's related to biblical studies, ancient languages, the ancient world within a software platform, and we just started doing some print publishing too. So
Oh,
that's
cool.
sort of who I am vocationally, if we can talk about how I got sort of drawn into this world,
Yes,
if
I'd
you
love
want.
to hear that. That'd be so cool.
Okay, well, when I've always been interested in anything, I like to say old and weird. And I can remember, doing book reports in seventh grade on UFO
Yeah.
books and the Loch Ness Monster and all that kind of stuff. It was just fascinating. It interested me a lot. I was what I would call a dabbler, for most of my life. But the turning point for me was the 50th anniversary of the Roswell event. When I was in grad school, I worked night security. I did a lot of third shift. So I had a lot of time to do my homework, listen to Coast and other shows, and it was great. But I
Hey,
remember listening.
I'm going to interject
Go ahead.
something here. Coast to Coast was an awakening point for so many people on this planet, and it was like going to school. If you get there every night for 10 years, you've got a degree in Art Bell.
Yep,
And
yep.
I really felt like I was part of the family. I'm going to throw a little anecdote in here. After, well, I don't even know how to explain this to people. I guess I'm a little psychic, Michael, because here's what happened. Ramona died, and I was very worried about Art, extremely worried, to the point where I almost drove down to his house to take care of him. But I talked to a couple of friends of mine, and we knew that a couple of very important friends to Art had already done the same thing. And he didn't know me from Adam, right? So I thought, oh, good. Okay, that's being taken care of. And then about 2 or 3 months after Ramona died, he got on the radio one night, and he opened his mouth and he said like 3 words, and I turned to my roommate and I said, he's in love with somebody else and he's going to get married very quick, very soon. And he looked at me like I was out of my mind, because he knew that what had all happened. He'd been listening to Art for years. He said,
Mhm.
You're crazy. There's no way." I said, "Nope, he's already in love with somebody else." I said, "It isn't the love he had for Ramona." I mean, I went through this whole explanation, right? It isn't the
Right.
love he had for Ramona. It's completely different. It's more companionship. He's 60 years old. He needs somebody to take care of him. He's not like us. He's that ilk of those guys who they have to have somebody do their laundry and cook for them or they can't survive, basically. And he just looked at me like I was out of my mind. And then I think within 2 or 3 weeks, Art came on the air and said, "Yeah, but a few weeks ago, blah, blah, blah." And I said, "See, I told you." And the weirdest thing that happened after that is, before they even got married, I said, "They're going to have a girl and she's going to look like Ramona." And sure enough, they've had a little girl, her Asia
Yep.
Rain, and I swear to folks, I think she looks a lot like Ramona. So it's very interesting to me, this whole thing. I just I don't know where it all came from, but Art's an amazing guy. That's all I got to say. To be 60 years old and married to a 20-year-old, you got to be some kind of guy for that.
Well,
So anyhow, I'll leave it at that.
yeah. I mean, I no, I understand. Because I used to look forward, to going to work, and sure, I would do my homework and all that stuff and write my papers, but it would have been really boring, really difficult, without something interesting, to listen to. And I can remember going back to how in the world I got involved in this stuff, at least at this level. The CNN did a conference from Roswell for the 50th anniversary, and I was listening to I can't remember if it was live or a replay, but it was a press conference, and they had a guy named Colonel Haynes, giving the Air Force explanation for the Roswell event. And I had read enough to know at the time that it was the third explanation for the Air Force, which in and of itself says something.
Hmm.
So Colonel Haynes is up there at the podium waxing eloquent about the crash and the so-called bodies and all this stuff, and a reporter asks a question, and he says, "Well, Colonel, isn't it true by the Air Force's own report? You've been talking about these crash test dummies. That isn't it true that those were only came into use in the early 1950s?" And when he asked that, he was of course correct. And I expected Colonel Haynes to say, "Oh, you're right. I'm sorry, I misspoke," and then sort of backtrack and comment on it. But he didn't. He actually
Oh.
said, and I actually went out and got the transcript. I mean, I ran to the computer, got the transcript online. for the CNN conference. But he actually said, we believe that the witnesses to the Roswell event, which at that time were a couple hundred people, all underwent time compression. And that was the phrase he used. And I'm like, what in the world is that? And the reporter, took the words right out of my mouth. What does that mean? And what he meant by that was that all the witnesses thought they were remembering something in 1947, but they were actually had experienced it in the early 1950s. And it's like, hello, this is the 50th anniversary. You're speaking at the 50th anniversary. 1997 minus 50 is 1947. It's not the early 1950s. And when I heard that, the answer was so dumb that I could just imagine this guy must have showed up at the press conference, and another military guy took him aside, a general or somebody who outranked him, and said, son, no matter how dumb you sound today, you're going to serve your country. and that's what we've got. I thought, you know what? This is so dumb, and it's so obvious. It's going to feed the conspiracy so easily and quickly and readily that somebody must want this story to live. Exactly. There must be some reason why this narrative, the alien narrative, needs to be perpetuated. Because it just didn't make any sense, and it sounded so odd. So that was really what drew me in, to becoming a little more serious about it. So the last year, I finished my schoolwork, and the first year I was supposed to work on my dissertation. I didn't want to do it. I was just kind of burned out, and I thought, you know what? I'm going to take a year off, and I'm going to write a novel. It's something I always wanted to do, and it's going to be UFO stuff. And I had command of a lot of material in ancient texts and ancient history and all this sort of stuff. And so out of that, what should have been the first year of my dissertation, I wrote The Facade. And
wow.
Through a whole crazy series of events, I wound up getting on Coast to Coast. And it was literally, this is going to amaze people, but it was literally like this. I finished the draft. I invited a friend to read it, and he loved it. And he said, you know what, you should get on Coast to Coast. And I'm like, oh, come on. And he said, no, seriously. I said, okay, you can pretend to be a publicist and go email the show. So because we thought there's like an army of people surrounding Art Bell. This email's never going to get through, This would take months and months and months. And so he says, okay, I'm going to do that. So he leaves, goes back home, sends the email out. That was a Sunday night. Okay. Monday morning, I come back. I come back from school, and my wife greets me at the door, which she never does. So it's like somebody either died or something's going on.
Right, yeah.
She goes, "You're not going to believe who I just got off the phone with." I said, "Well, who are you?" "Art Bell. He wants you to call him."
Oh,
I said,
cool.
"Come on." And I did. And of course, I recognized the voice because I've been listening to the guy for years. And then I discovered that they only book people, 2 weeks out at a time, and so he wanted to know who I was, and we chatted, and he said, okay, we'll book you for the show. Well, it was supposed to be 2 weeks out. I don't even have anything to sell, like the book. The novel's not real, I didn't. We were completely unprepared.
Hey, Michael, we're going to continue with this, but that's wild. We've hit our first break already. I can't believe it because we've just barely getting going here. But hey, everyone, stick with us. We'll be right back with Michael Heiser here on California MUFON Radio. Welcome back, everyone, to the California MUFON Radio Show. I'm your host, Lorien Fenton, and we're back here on Inception Radio Network. And I have a very special guest with me tonight, and that's Michael Heiser. And Michael, could you finish up your story about Art Bell? I'm so fascinated by it. But
Sure.
Before we get to the Art Bell story, I do have a request from the chat. They want to know, what is your favorite type of pie?
Oh, I love all fruit pies. But I think probably my favorite would be cherry, and followed but closely by apple. I don't know, is mincemeat a fruit?
I think it's a fruit sort. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, it has raisins in it. So.
There we go. Wonderful. Okay, see, guys out there in chat room, Michael's a big pie fan as well. So, and everybody's very happy that you answered that. So, We're in good
Great.
shape tonight, Michael. Okay, great. So, anyhow, back to Art Bell. So, your wife greets you at the door and she goes, "Guess who I
Yeah.
just talked to?" And then you
Yeah. So
call Art and
yeah. And he books me, and it's a little bit, it's about 2 weeks out, and so I'm thinking, okay, I have this manuscript now. I have the opportunity to like do something. It was in the beginning days of print on demand, so I could throw something together. I think I'll be okay. I'll be okay. I'll be okay. You're kind of overwhelmed by the fact that Art Bell just called you, and how did that happen? Well, 2 or 3 days later, I'm in school. I was a teaching assistant, so I'm teaching my class, and my office mate comes rushing into the classroom and says, "You have an emergency phone call. You have to cancel your class." And so canceled everything, followed her upstairs, and I'm thinking somebody got hit by a car, something happened to one of the kids, what's going
right.
on. I pick up the phone in my office, and it's Art Bell. It's like I don't even know how he found me, because this is on the campus. I don't even know where the extension is even published anywhere.
Right, right.
So I'm like, what in the world's going on? And he sounded horrible. And he basically said, "Look, I'm really sick, I can't do the show tonight. And unbelievably, the guest that was going to come on can't do the show tonight. So I'm handing the show over to Ian Punnett, and I want to know if you will go on tonight."
Oh,
And
wow.
I'm like, it's one of those things you can't say no.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
it's art. You want to help him out, and plus it's this unique opportunity. So I said, I had the presence of mind to say, of course, of course I'll go on and help you out, but I'd really like to go on again when you're to do a show with you. And he said, "Oh, that's fine, no problem." So
Yeah.
I wound up doing this show really just by the seat of my pants with Ian, and it turned out it was really great because Ian was a seminary student at the time,
Exactly. Yeah.
and he and I could really dialogue at a different level because he was familiar with some of the language and some of the things we got into, because the facade, which is what was the focal point of the show, the facade is really there's sort of two centerpieces, if I can be a little
Oh, sure.
imprecise with my
Yes. No,
language
that's where
there.
we were going next, anyhow. So let's go.
Yeah, the facade raises and asks two questions of the reader. The first one is, what would the impact be on traditional Judaism and Christianity if there were a genuine, irrefutable extraterrestrial reality? What would the impact be? And so the storyline confronts the characters and the main character, who is essentially me, because I'd never written fiction before. So my thought was there needs to be at least one character in here that I know, so
Hmm.
that I can get them right. And
Right. Right.
they're this is sort of where they're led to. They don't know where they're at. Again, the character doesn't know where he's at. He eventually finds out. He's really fed a bunch of BS about what the purpose of why he was brought here and all this sort of stuff. And there's just an amazing number of layers in the book, lots of misdirection. But eventually they get confronted with this question. And then the second question is, well, what if what was presented to us as an extraterrestrial reality is something worse? Something sinister. Because an extraterrestrial reality in and of itself doesn't have to be sinister. It'd be something paradigm changing. But what
True.
if what was really going on, what if that was another misdirection for something even worse? And that enabled me to get into my academic expertise is actually divine beings, demonology in ancient, in biblical texts and ancient Jewish texts and things like that. So that let me play in that arena as well. So on the cover of the facade, the original one anyway, and I think we have it on the new cover, I have something about everything in the facade in the book is real. Uh, and that's actually true. It's not marketing shtick. Everything in the book is real. All the data points are real. I put a lot of research time into it, but what's fiction is the way I connect the data points, and of course, the story and the characters themselves. But uh, it's done actually pretty well on Amazon. Between Amazon and Goodreads, I have about 150 reviews and
Oh,
four and a
wow,
half
that's great.
stars. I mean, it's holding its own. It was just so much fun. Afterwards I had to go back into the real world and do my dissertation, but because I was on coast to coast, I sort of got drawn in to this world in a different capacity, and because of my background, people were asking me, what about Zecharia Sitchin, and what about this, and what about that? I had actually not, yeah, I'd never really looked at Sitchin while I
Sure.
was writing the book, because that's not really what the book is about. The book is broader than that. But once I did, it was like, oh, well, I know why people are asking me this now, and that sort of led to my reputation as the Sitchin debunker, and I'm standing by my own work here. I am what Sitchin pretends to be. I do have a command of the ancient languages because I had to. That was my graduate program, and I think actually the ancient astronaut world orbit does a disservice to ufology. I do not think the ancient astronaut stuff is credible at all. I do think Sitchin is quite wrong, and he makes unbelievably, simplistic errors in his handling of ancient texts. But I try to separate that and sort of compartmentalize that so that it doesn't infect my attitude toward ufology. I mean, serious ufology. And I agree. I think what MUFON's trying to do, what other groups are trying to do, to collect data, take it seriously, treat people with respect. I mean, most I have learned firsthand, and I've also learned because I've read a lot of the literature, that most people who report sightings and personal episodes, they're not fakes. They're not doing hoaxes. You have that every now and then,
Exactly.
but
Yeah,
but they're not making it up. They're not trying to make a buck off of it. They're just telling their story. And
exactly.
it's up to us to help them parse the story. And sometimes you can provide an answer that isn't what they thought it was, and other times you can't. But that's the serious world of ufology for me. And again, I try to read peer-reviewed material, and believe it or not, there's a lot of peer-reviewed material in this area. So I try to treat it seriously, read serious stuff, but the ancient astronaut stuff is just so hokey on so many levels
Well,
that
let me
it's
ask you a few
unfortunate.
questions about why you think it's hokey. Because
Sure.
let's take, for example, I'm watching one of the ancient astronaut show or ancient alien show, and I'm seeing those big boulders down in South America that have just precision cuts in them, and they're stuck together like, they couldn't even build them right now if they wanted to because they don't have that type of capability. What do you say about stones and ruins like that these guys are all hypothesizing about?
Well,
What's your
I
feeling about those?
believe it or not, archaeologists have spent a lot of time, studying these things. If you do something like an obelisk, might be more familiar to people, the long cylindrical shapes,
Sure.
like Egypt and stuff like that. If you actually examine, some of those things, and again these balls as well, you can see the little chip marks on them. They're hand done. They use one type of implement to pound out the shape from the rock, and then when they get it to a certain degree, then they'll use a different type, to take the edges off, and you keep working it until you get something smooth. I mean, it's a hand process. It takes a crazy amount of time, but they can do it. They can make a circle. They know how to do things with measuring lines and whatnot. They can measure things so that they're accurate on all sides, and you just keep working it. But I mention that because a lot of the literature, a lot of the work that's been done in this area never gets to the public. It's published in scholarly journals, which are not publicly accessible. Those of us in the academic guild like to refer to it as fugitive literature.
Oh, that's interesting. Well, let
it
me
you
let me
just never
interject
get to it.
one. Yeah, let me interject one more thing. Do you think that engineers would come out and talk about this on a much more realistic level if they were given the time and the money and the research materials to go down and pick apart those boulders?
Yeah, I
I just
think.
don't think anybody ever gives them the money to do those type of things.
Well, I think if it involved damage to an artifact, they'd probably never get it approved.
Yeah.
Um, I think you would have a willingness to do it, Have you ever heard of Wally Wallington?
No, never.
Okay, look, if you want a, a couple of hours of sheer entertainment where you're just not going to believe what you're looking at, and it'll be funny half the time too because of the guy doing it. You go to theforgottentechnology.com.
Okay.
Wally Wallington is a retired construction worker in Flint, Michigan. I bought his home video CD, and I used to play it every year in my Egyptology class when I taught here at the local university. And I told my students the first day, I said, "You're not going to remember anything I say in this class except for one day." Okay, I mean, I really build it up. This will be the day you never forget from your undergraduate education. And what Wallington does is he's the guy who built a Stonehenge like structure in his backyard without the use of a wheel by himself.
What?
25,000-pound slabs that he pours them. I mean, you'd think that this is the most boring thing in the world to watch, but it's fascinating. What he does is he's a master of applied physics. That's what he does. And he got the idea on a job site one day when they had to move a rock that the crane could not handle. So he had to come up with a way to move this thing just using the tools around him. And you'd think that's impossible. But what he does, and he shows you, again, he builds the slab, he pours the concrete, it's 25,000 pounds. He shows you how to use balance and counterweight to move objects and eventually put them upright. Sure. He has a little wooden lever that he uses. It's just hilarious. I mean, he changes shirts about 10 times in the video, because it's just him. He's got his butt crack showing half the time. It's just one of those. But you're riveted because
does he use pulleys and levers or pulleys and?
He shows you in one part of the video what he calls his he has the Wallington lever, which is his little wrench. It's actually a big wrench, but it's made out of 2x4s. Okay. And then he has what he calls his like pyramid hoist. And what he does is he shows you how to get the angle of the pyramid without a measuring stick, just using a stick. And he also shows you when he does that you can derive the Pythagorean theorem from this stick.
Well, you could actually, couldn't you?
Yeah, it's just 3, 4, 5. The same unit of measure.
Exactly.
But the angle you get is the angle of the Great Pyramid, and he goes, "I don't think that's a coincidence." And then he shows this. He builds this wooden thing according to the angle of the pyramid, and then he has a 500-pound block, and he ties some rope to it. He puts it over a wooden like cylinder at the top, and he has grease on it. And again, half the stuff he's using is in Egyptian artwork.
Right.
I mean, it's simple stuff, but when you see it, you think, I am so stupid. Why couldn't I figure this out? It looks so obvious to you when you see it. And he has one guy pulling this 500-pound block up this incline ramp like in 1.2 seconds. And he goes, "Well, that just generated 2 horsepower." And then he's, "Well, if you had 50 guys on the other end, just think of what you could lift." The physics principles are the same. To me, the culmination of his CD, and I think it's only like $15. I mean, I just recommend it to everybody who has this ancient technology question. The culmination of the CD is he moves his entire garage across his yard using the same technique.
That's amazing.
He has to build a frame for it, and he builds a bigger version of his quote unquote Wallington lever, but he uses counterweight so he doesn't have to lift anything. You just rock things back and forth, put little pieces and sticks of wood underneath, and it raises it. You just have to be patient. And then when you're up, to spin it and move it in a different location so you don't have to lift, you attach a lever and you apply counterweight so that it takes the weight away from the thing that you want to move. Again, it's just applied physics.
Exactly. So, and who's to say that the people, 10,000 years ago didn't have that ability?
Oh,
easily,
I think they did. I think They understood, again, how to move objects like this. This is, pardon the pun, this is not rocket science. But it's just, since we have a different kind of technology today, like hydraulics, for instance, we
Sure.
don't think in those terms.
Yep.
We wouldn't necessarily, it takes a guy who's in a pickle on a job site, to apply what he knows to get something moved. We just don't think of that. Well, where's the crane? Where's the hydraulic? Where's this? Where's that? We just don't think of these things. Well, they didn't have any of that. And so they had to come up with other solutions, and they did.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, very interesting. Okay. So we've pretty much, well, we haven't exhausted Sitchin yet, because now I want to know, the ancient alien guys are kind of like on the outs with us now. What about the whole Sitchin thing where you're talking about, let's see, on the website, I was reading this earlier today, Sitchin is wrong. How is it that we can say that Sitchin is wrong? And we know that the ancient alien dudes on TV are, now, honestly, in all honesty here, Michael, I got to say maybe 50% of what they're finding and saying on ancient aliens might be true. I don't know. But I think you've got a very good handle on probably what was going on back in those days. Now, who knows if there wasn't some kind of alien type of intervention? What is your, let's start with that. What is your opinion
Sure.
about alien intervention, building those type of stone structures or monuments or the pyramids or, whatever that is? And then we'll get into why Sitchin is wrong. Okay?
Yeah. Well, I again, with the technology thing, I think, again, and I say I think, but in many cases, it's something that's known from the records of the day. How a particular piece of technology was done and how a structure was accomplished. And we also have good analogies from modern eras before there were cranes that would lift massive weight, how things were done. And again,
Right.
we can't be sure that what the Romans did is the same thing that the Egyptians did, but it can be done without a crane, is the point. So there are all sorts of, again, engineering techniques that experts whose area is the history of technology or the history of science are quite aware of, but unfortunately a lot of the material doesn't filter down into the public. And that's, some of it's academic snobbery, some of it's just the way the academy does things, publishing in journals that don't get sold in stores. An academic journal, for people who aren't familiar with it, is where scholars write for other scholars. It's very
Exactly.
it is. It's very
It's peer
insular.
reviewed.
Yeah, it's peer reviewed, and they don't care to explain it. They don't care if anybody else reads it, because this is what we do: publish or perish, and all that kind of stuff. But since I'm part of that world, I have access to all that material. And part of what I do on the blog is, when I can post some of these things, I do when the journal copyrights permit that, or I try to make it digestible for the average person and whatnot. Now with Sitchin's thing is really text, and that's actually easier because you can actually go look at his claims and see what's going on. Now, people often mistake my criticism of Sitchin as a translation problem. Well, Mike, you have one translation and Sitchin has another. It's actually much worse than that. I have an open letter on my sitchiniswrong.com site, and I'm saying point blank that the core alien ideas that Sitchin has, his whole worldview, things like the Anunnaki came from some celestial object like a planet, that the Anunnaki are associated with Nibiru, that Nibiru cycles through our solar system every 3,600 years. Okay, these are core ideas to Sitchin's material. I'm
Right.
saying they don't even exist in the texts. They're not even there. He makes it up. That's why he's wrong. And to prove that, what I did, again, this is boring video, but I made a video, screen capture video, of me going to the electronic cuneiform database, okay, and putting in the term for Anunnaki. You see me type it on the screen, hit the button, and I get all the search results, all the places where Anunnaki is referred to in ancient texts. And then there's a little TR next to them. That means it gives you the English translation. There are a little over 100 of them. So my challenge is, look, do the search, click the English translation, and I'm telling you right now, point blank, that these ideas do not exist in the tablets. Sitchin
Very
is wrong.
interesting.
So it's I'm not debating on translations or anything like that. I mean, there are other aspects of his work, like what he does with Genesis 1:26, let us create humankind in our image and all that stuff. There you do get into translation and grammar, but Sitchin often blunders the grammar. A classic example, Elohim. Sitchin insists that Elohim, should not be translated God, but gods, because it's plural. Okay, well, Elohim is what we call in language morphologically plural. That means its spelling or its shape, the word form, is plural. But of the 2,000 plus instances in the Hebrew Bible where this word occurs, there's only a handful of them that the grammar tells you should be translated plural. Everything else is singular. We have words like this in English, okay? If I say, hey, Lorien, deer, D-E-E-R, how many? Well, you have no idea. I have to put it into a sentence.
Exactly.
If I say, the deer is running, well, because of the verb form is and then running, it has to be one, because
Correct.
English grammar tells you that. If I say the deer are running, well, then it's more than one. It's the same thing with Elohim. Elohim has to be put into a sentence, and then you can tell, if you know Hebrew, if it's singular or plural. Again, it's not rocket science. So again, boring website. What I did was I ran a search for all the places that Elohim occurs, all the places it occurs with plural verb forms, so it's plural. I did all these searches. I made PDFs of the results. I put them up on my website, because one of the things I think that separates me from a lot of other people in this arena is that, look, I don't want you to take my word for this. I'm going to show you the literature. I'm going to show you the results. I'm going to run the searches for you. I'm going to show you how to follow the breadcrumb trail back to my claim. And then, you can evaluate it. I'm going to show my work. It's like you're looking over my shoulder. I'm not just going to assert something. And
Yes.
yeah, he's wrong. He's wrong in a number of ways. Now, I do not think, for the sake of your listeners, and I get asked this all the time, I do not look at Sitchin like he's some sinister figure. You mentioned at the beginning of the show how people in the lecture circuit in ufology that are pretty well, have high name recognition, what they sort of talk about off air. I've had some of those people tell me off the record that, Sitchin is an Illuminati plant. He was working for the government. He's a disinformation. I don't believe any of that. I just think he's a journalist by training. I haven't been able to find any evidence that he actually took any of these ancient languages other than Hebrew. He was Jewish. I don't look at him as a sinister figure. I don't think he was a plant. I don't think he was a disinformation agent. I think he just seized on an idea and came to believe his own writing.
Exactly. Yes. And I think
just
a lot of people do that. They start on a research path and they think they're putting pieces of a puzzle together, but they're actually putting pieces of their ego into the puzzle, which cause it to kind of get askew. And you can't fault some of them for that, because they get caught up in their own stuff,
It's a human thing.
It is. It's a human thing, and I have no problem with it. It's just that when it turns into a cult religion and people are following you around for this, it just kind of scares the bejesus out of me, because I want hard facts. I want the truth, It's like they say, maybe you can't handle the truth. Well, I want the real truth, and that's why I'm happy to hear you say and have enough chutzpah, as they say, to actually come out and say this on my show, that you don't think he's right.
I've had. I mean, I remember the after my first appearance on the Art Bell show. Again, I'm not going to out this person.
Ooh, hey, you know what? Let's talk
ahead.
about that right after the break. I
right.
can't believe it. I just got the big old thumbs up like it's break time. I'm like, already? What? Are you kidding? Anyhow, okay, everybody stay with us. We'll be right back with Michael Heiser right after this break. Welcome back, everyone, to the California MUFON Radio Show. I'm your host, Lorien Fenton, and I'm here with a very special guest tonight. That's Michael Heiser, and I hope I'm saying it right. We'll have to ask Michael about that in just a moment. I forgot to ask him how to pronounce his last name, so I could be doing it all wrong. But his website, which we haven't talked about yet, is drmsh.com. That's msh.com, DR for doctor, M for Michael, S I'm not sure about, and H for Heiser. So we'll be back with Michael in just a moment. Now, you guys all know what time of the show this is for me. This is where I do my MUFON part. And this is very important to me because I have a MUFON meeting this Saturday in Northern California, and it's with Deborah Taveras. Now, Deborah is over on the Rents Network. She's there 5 days a week for an hour, I believe. I could have it wrong, but she's a very interesting and very controversial person, and she really has not a whole lot to do with UFOs or aliens. And the reason I'm having her at my MUFON meeting is because I have every October Conspiracy Month at my MUFON meeting. And this is where we kind of go out of the box. We get away from the aliens, even though we're going to ask Deborah her belief on aliens when she gets to the meeting, definitely for sure. And if she's ever seen a UFO or anything like that. But we're going to vary off into mind control, government control, the Illuminati. We're going to touch smart meters. We're going to touch all kinds of fun and horrible things that just scare the bejesus out of us. And we're going to do that on purpose because we can. And that's the wonderful part about MUFON. They have allowed me once a year to go out of the box and do kind of things that, I do on my radio show. Just get out there and let people know the truth about what we're fighting for out here on the old planet and seeing what we can do to conjure up some kind of cool stuff. So anyhow, we're doing something a little different, and I hope if you're in Northern California, you can make it. It's in Petaluma, California. The website is oh God, I got to remember my website now. Okay, MUFONMarinSonoma.com. That's MUFON, Marin County, Sonoma County.com, but without the counties. So it's just MUFONMarinSonoma.com. Please try to make it if you're in Northern California. We'd love to see you there. And the other most important part about my MUFON spiel that I do here every week on California MUFON is this. It's not about the politics. It is all about the camaraderie now. The government, the black ops, the people that are out there, maybe the bad aliens, even maybe the good aliens, don't want you guys getting together and talking about this. And that's what MUFON is there for now. It gives you a place to go and meet other like-minded people that believe in what you believe, maybe have seen what you've seen, and you guys can get together, look at each other eye to eye, and have a great time and talk about this stuff together so that we can make some informed decisions about what we believe in and how we believe in it and why we believe in it. And that is the most important thing we can do for each other out there on this planet, really, folks, is to get together and talk it all out and see each other eye to eye. Very important. So get to a MUFON meeting near you. Join MUFON. It's only $35 a year. You get a wonderful newsletter, all kinds of nice stuff. And it's really, really an amazing way to keep in touch with other people that are like-minded and searching like you are through the MUFON website. That's MUFON.com. Join today. Please, please, please. You'll have a lot of fun doing so and get to a meeting near you. Okay. So I think at the beginning of the show, I mentioned that I spoke at a church this last weekend, and I'm trying to remember what I had the funniest question, and it kind of relates to what Michael's been talking about here. Somebody asked me if I knew Art Bell. And I was laughing wholeheartedly because I don't know him at all, but I feel like I do know him because I've had so many connections with the man over the years. I'm going to tell one more little Art Bell story here before we get back to Michael. And that was the second or third time he decided he was going to retire from his show. I was driving home from Portland, Oregon, where my family resides, and back to San Francisco. And I turn on 910 KEX radio in Portland, and I'm getting out out of town. I'm out by Salem, and I hear the announcer that morning say, "Oh, did you hear the Coast to Coast show last night, everybody? Art Bell is really retiring. He's never coming back, and this is the end of Art Bell and the end of Coast to Coast." And I started crying, and I cried all the way to, I think, Weed, California. I cried for 3.5 hours. It was terrible. I don't know why. I couldn't stop crying. It was like my heart had broken, that I couldn't have my Art Bell fix every night or something. But that's how close I felt to Art Bell. I still do to this day. I hope someday to meet him and just thank him for being the force du jour, or force de tour de force. Yeah, it's not a force of the day. It was a tour de force of eternity, it feels like, that he was out there bringing on all these amazing people on and opening my consciousness, my mind, and everything else. He's just been an amazing, amazing ride, as I would say. And I miss hearing "Want to take a ride?" I loved that line. That line just kept me going for years and years. So that's my my crying to Art Bell story, and I thought you guys might enjoy that. So, okay, Michael Heiser and Michael, am I saying it right?
You are correct. It is
Oh,
Heiser.
thank God. I hate it when I get through a whole show and then I realize, boy, I never did ask him at the beginning of the show. I was so worried about my Skype that I completely gave up on the whole, what I usually do, 5 minutes before the show starts. So here we are. Okay, so you were telling us about, oh, boy, you've got to remind me where we were, because it was your story.
You had mentioned, having a little bit of chutzpah, to basically just tell people what you think. Well, shortly after my first time on Art's show, I got a really, not only a nasty, email, but somebody posted something on their website. And again, this is a well-known figure accusing me of getting rich, off Zechariah Sitchin and what a horrible person I was and all this stuff. So my response was, I posted my tax returns on the internet. I blacked out the Social Security numbers. I posted them on the internet, and then I challenged, again, publicly as I could online, this person, will you do the same? And I'll ask Sitchin to do it too, which I did. And that was the end of the conversation. I'm just a struggling graduate student. I wrote this novel because, I just wanted something to do that I would enjoy. I enjoy the subject matter. And, I didn't start this journey, having this guy in my crosshairs, but he came up, and I'm going to tell you what I think, and if you think I'm getting wealthy, well, let's see who's making more money, and
yes.
I'm telling you, again, I'm giving you factual information, allowing you, giving you access to the resources so you can check up on me, and buddy, you're not doing that. So it's put up or shut up time is really what it was. And, you just, stuff like that just happens, and I should mention again to your audience, because I know I'm going to be new to a lot of people. I'm also sort of an equal opportunity offender. A lot of what we've talked about to this point has been, well, I don't think Sitchin's correct. And, there's been a little bit of a skeptical bent again, but I offend the other side too, and typically religious types. I mean, I'm a biblical scholar, but a lot of what I say is really uncomfortable on that side because, again, like the facade proposes, that, hey, what if there was a genuine extraterrestrial reality? And my position on that is it wouldn't matter. Theologically, it wouldn't matter. It's not going to overturn, the apple cart of biblical theology if there is a genuine extraterrestrial reality out there. Now, when there are certain claims attached to that, well, there is no God, and the aliens really created us. Well, then there's going to be some friction, some problems there. But the idea in and of itself, the presence of extraterrestrial life, is not a non-biblical or unbiblical idea. A lot of people don't realize. I mean, I've given this lecture at X conferences and a few conferences in Roswell, but I have a whole lecture. People go to YouTube and put in my last name and put in something like extraterrestrial life and Christianity. They're going to get this lecture. It's an hour long of me talking about could Judeo-Christianity, conservative Judeo-Christianity, accommodate an extraterrestrial reality? And the answer is yes. It's actually a very
Yeah.
old question. It goes back to even before the Christian era.
Well,
You
Michael,
got
I got to
Plato and
say
all these
something.
philosophers.
I've got to say something right here. Aren't angels extraterrestrials? I mean, and the Watchers. I mean, we've had extraterrestrials, if you want to give them that quote unquote extraterrestrial line, we've had them going on since the beginning of the Bible. It's not like it's anything new to our humanity,
Right.
you know?
I would use the phrase non-human entity and not extraterrestrial, but here's why. I do that for the UFO community. Because when you're talking about UFOs and alien life and SETI and all this stuff, for that audience, the definition of extraterrestrial is an embodied being that apparently has to, needs nutrition and hydration, has to perpetuate its species somehow, subject to the laws of physics or whatever. In other words, you get this profile that it's not an earthly life form, but it's a life form that operates within, again, the bounds as we know them. I think when you get to maybe another dimension, the sort of the dimensionality talk, the interdimensionality talk, it's probably a little closer. You can have sort of a more approximate discussion of the way that the Bible and other religious books talk about angels, because they don't really talk about them in those terms that we would normally associate with finding extraterrestrial life. They having to come here in spacecraft and all that kind of thing. The interdimensional model is probably it draws the two sides a little bit closer than your traditional.
I agree. And everybody that I've ever that's listened to my show knows that I am a firm belief that it's interdimensional, much more so than universal contact that we're having. If we're having that contact in that way at all, it's definitely got to be interdimensional, because how in the heck are these guys getting here in flying saucers?
Yeah, but just even allowing that discussion to happen again and again, it's very old. The early church fathers talked about this.
Yeah.
For them, the discussion was called the other worlds discussion. Are there other worlds? And then, of course, when you talk about that, you ask the question, well, do people live on those other worlds and whatnot? So it's really a very, very old discussion that it's only been in the last couple hundred years that within Christian circles, again, what we would call, quote, Bible-believing circles, that the idea of alien life has really become something that's feared and that the Christian community has been hostile to. And that's because it gets tied to other ideas of Darwinian evolution. That's the boogeyman within a lot of Christian circles. I mean, I don't, it's not a boogeyman for me, but because the idea that if there are aliens out there, they must have evolved like we evolved. Christians want to throw out or are afraid of or really despise the whole idea of evolution. So the alien life question sort of gets thrown out with it. There's a lot of reasons why the attitude within conservative religious circles is different now than it was in other eras. But the fact that I'm sort of drawing attention to that and saying, hey, we can actually have this discussion, it troubles, some people. So again, I get to be the equal opportunity offender in some cases, but that's okay. If you're going to ask me what I think, I'll tell you, and you don't have to like it. But,
I have no problem with
it.
And one of the things that's great about my audience and myself as well, I hope that I can say this, and I truly mean it from the bottom of my heart, is I listen to everybody's opinion, because the minute you start becoming focused on one thing is true or real, then you will never get to the point where you actually understand the real truth that's out there. I firmly believe that you've got to be open to everything, and you've got to take all of it into whatever it is that you believe are the true facts for whatever it is you're looking for. And believe me, there's so many people looking for so many different things in this community. That's why I'm so vague about my statement there. It's because I don't even know what they're doing anymore. Frankly.
No.
I mean, one person says Roswell's the real thing. The next one says, no, there's a crash at Corona. And then the next one says, no, they crashed in the water off of Sag Harbor. And then the next one's, no, they were over here. And then the next one's, no, they're grays. No, they're mantoids. No, they're this. And then it's like, no, they're from planet this. And no, they're from interdimensional. And No, they're time travelers, and by the time you get done, man, your head is spinning. I mean, it's just like, what?
Yeah,
So what I try to do is I just go, okay, I'm going to listen to all of this, and here's how I determine what's going on. I
Mhm.
hear something from people in the community that are not spoken, they don't speak out very often. These are people that come out of the woodwork long enough to say, blah,
Mhm.
blah, blah, or I did this, or I was part of that, or something, and then they disappear and you never hear from them again.
Mhm.
Or they come to you, or they come to somebody that they truly trust in the community, and then they're gone. And then I hear something from that, and I go, okay, and I put it in the back of my mind. And then maybe 7 years later, I'll hear another thing, the same exact thing from another source in a completely different area. And I will go, now that's interesting. And then if it happens a third time, maybe 5 years after that, then I know that that's probably what's going on. But I don't take anything at face value that anybody tells me until I've actually heard about it from many different sources over a very long time. Because I just don't trust what's out there right now. I think there's too many disinformation people and
Mhm.
very, very convoluted ideas going on out there that a lot of them are just coming out of ego, as I mentioned before. So sorry to interrupt you, but I had to get that off my
No,
chest.
it's well that's data. That's data collection. I mean, there's data collection and there's data analysis, but you can't do the analysis without the data. I mean, you got to
Exactly.
collect it. And my position is, I to this point, I don't, see, I would say I don't know that there are extraterrestrials out there. Therefore, I don't believe that there are. I want to be convinced. I want data that shows me that. The
Oh, then I've got to
questions
get you the
and
poster. I've got to
yeah,
get you the I Want to Believe poster from X Files then.
I actually have one from like season two.
Oh, great. I
You
was going
know,
to send
I
you one for
I
Christmas.
was not able to get like the original from season one.
Ah.
But true confessions, I have one, But you follow what I'm saying. There to me it's an open question. The question is not data. So you can't use the question itself to prove anything. But you
That's
try to collect data. You try to come up with what might be the most reasonable options and so on and so forth. I I don't think that's unreasonable. So I don't. While I'm not a quote believer, I'm not a really like a hardened unbeliever either. I'd kind of like I want to know it. To me, it would be one of the neatest things to know to get verified one way or the other in my lifetime. It's just it's on that little short list of things I'd like to see happen before I die. It would be really fascinating. When it comes to like biblical stuff, a lot of what people use the Bible for to defend UFO beliefs, I think, is silly, like Barry Downing's stuff and all that. But let me show you a couple examples from the New Testament that, let's say we
Oh,
discovered that there
sure.
were aliens. Aliens are real. We discover that tomorrow. Well, I think the New Testament actually has that covered. In other words, there are actually passages that could really address that. One of them is Hebrews, in the book of Hebrews. It's a New Testament book, chapter 11, verse. We've got verse 2 here. Well, let's just start in the first verse. Now, faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. For by it the people of old received their commendation. By faith we understand that the universe was created by the word of God, so that what is seen is not made of things that are visible. The word universe there in this translation, which is the ESV, is the Greek word ion. We get our word eon from it, like a long unit of time, but it's
Sure.
actually plural. Okay, so you could translate the verse, by faith we understand that the worlds were created by the word of God, because aeon is used to, it can get translated as world in other passages. There's another one of these in Hebrews chapter 1. The same thing, ion is in the plural. And again, if you sort of were a committed Christian or some other religious believer that this wasn't part of your worldview, and tomorrow we find out that they're really aliens, they're other populated worlds. Well, right here you go. You just have to penetrate the English translation to get to the original Greek language, and by faith we understand that the worlds were created by the Word of God. That you still have creation. Okay, you still have the sovereignty of God, that whole idea, but you have other worlds. It's not really a hard jump to make.
And when you say other worlds, there may be other humans too.
Right.
And other creatures that may be like human. Yeah, exactly.
There are other, I think there are actually other more complicated questions when it comes to the possible intersection of, again, biblical theology, Christianity, and the whole extraterrestrial question. Things that have to do with the work of Christ and salvation and some of these other doctrines, because the Bible itself doesn't know of other worlds, other populated worlds. The Bible is an ancient document. Its content doesn't know of planets beyond Saturn. That's another thing Sitchin is wrong about. I mean, if we actually have astrolabes in Sumerian and Akkadian cuneiform, astronomical texts, hundreds and hundreds of lines, and in none of them is there a known planet beyond Saturn. This is very typical. Same thing in the Bible, very typical of the ancient Near Eastern knowledge base at the time. So it's very limited in its understanding, but yet, you look at it, and there is language in there, again, to accommodate something that could be discovered later. So I don't look at it as a stumbling block, but I'm just asking for real evidence. I don't think that's unreasonable.
And I don't blame you one bit. And I just happen to be one of those people who wants to believe more than I want to disbelieve. And you're just right. You're 5 points ahead of me on the other side. So there we are. So I don't know why I want to. I'm sorry, Michael. What was that?
Where's your poster hanging?
Oh, it's actually in a tube right over here in the corner of the room. I have I actually have about 7 of them. I send them to people that deserve them.
Okay. See, since mine is old and I hope worth something, nowadays I actually have mine, packaged as well, and sort of it's where I know it is, so that it doesn't get accidentally thrown out.
Exactly. I hear you. Yeah. The wife will get to it one of these days. Oh,
well,
good.
My wife she's actually committed such a faux pas in the past.
Oh, dear.
So
dear.
Yeah, we went to remember back when the X-Files was big and they had that traveling expo?
Yes, I do. I never made it to it, but I heard about it.
We went to the one in Chicago. It was just a couple hours driving, and I was in grad school in Madison. We went to the one in Chicago, and one of the stations they had was you could get your picture taken, against a blue screen or a green screen in Mulder's office. And my wife has red hair, and so it's like she's sitting on the corner of the desk, and I'm at Mulder's desk. And we had this great picture, with the pencils sticking in the ceiling, the whole bit, just like it is on the show. And she accidentally burned it. When we got back home, because we had a burn barrel for paper trash, and she accidentally destroyed it.
Oh, so that's just heartbreaking.
I know, we laugh about it. I said that's the single dumbest thing she's ever done in the history of our marriage.
Well,
so it's like I'm hiding the other thing.
Oh my God, I've got an X-Files story for you, and I think the audience would very much appreciate this. Not that it's a bodily function story, so I think they all could get it. So not that I have people that wouldn't get it otherwise, okay? But here's the story. I watch X-Files religiously with my friends, and I go to their home every Sunday night for how many years was that? 8 years. And so when it was over, I went to the bakery down the street and I said, I want a black cake with the X-Files white X on it and what have you. And so they made it up. It was great. We all ate it. We ate tons of it, of course. We had a great time. And then for 4 days afterwards, I got emails from people saying, you have no idea what color was coming out at the other end of me for days.
Food poisoning?
No, it was the colored dye in the frosting for the black. So people were a little freaked out the
Yep.
first day, and by the third or fourth day, they were like, "Okay, all right, it's okay now." But
It's
yeah,
like
so
the
that
black oil. You should have told him it was the
it was
black
the
oil.
black goo. That's what I told them. I said it was the black oil. They were laughing for months over that one. Okay, folks. Well, it's time for our final break. So we're going to have to come right back. We'll be back with Michael Heiser here in just a moment. Welcome back, everyone, to the California MUFON Radio Show. I'm your host, Lorien Fenton. I'm glad you're here with us tonight on the Wednesday evening, October 1st. And it's been a wild ride, and we're just sitting here, my head's spinning. That's all I got to say is my head is spinning. Had a great time here with Michael Heiser tonight. I want to thank everybody in chat for the wonderful comments. It's been really fun in chat tonight. I want to thank you all for the pie and everything else that's been going on in there. And one other thing that I've got to start mentioning that I haven't been doing, and I'm so bad at it, is that I take questions from the chat room and the chat room only during the last half hour of my show. I'm sorry, folks, I don't take calls. The only call I will ever take is JC from the Art Bell Show. That's the only call. I've been waiting for him to call me forever. He's never called. Maybe someone can get the word out to him that I will take his call. So if JC wants to call in, I'm ready for you, guy. I'd love to talk to you. So he's the only call I will take, though. And the rest of it, you guys just have to type it up in the chat room and I will put it out there. And I believe MJ has a way you could probably email him at Inception Radio Network at one of these. MJ will give me that. It's either Gmail or Hotmail or Yahoo or some place like that. Gmail. It's Inception Radio Network at gmail.com. I suppose that if you put a really burning question into that, he will get it to me. So we'll have that as well. So there you go. So everybody in chat, it's your time. So get going here. I've got a few going so far, but I'm waiting for more. All right. So, Michael, where were we? We were just at the part where the X-Files was a huge part of your life. And do you want to tell them about your rounds at the place? I think that's such a great story. I think we should tell it now.
Yeah, I used to watch the X-Files while I was at work. When I was going through graduate school, one of my jobs, a full-time job, was a security guard. And I was a guard at a biotech firm in Madison, and in the firm, I was the only one in the building, and so I had to do rounds on the hour every hour. So I would make sure I was done with one, and they had a little theater room. It sat about 150 people, so I would set everything up so that on Sunday night I could sit in the theater all by myself with the big screen on and watch the X-Files. It was great.
God, I'm so envious. You have no idea. Just envious. Oh, what a great story. I'll tell you what, X-Files they were another paradigm shifting thing for me. I could tell they were for you too. And I think they were for a lot of people. I think Art Bell and the X-Files just awakened. They were kind of like a tipping point for a lot of people. And it just opened so many people up to the possibilities that there's so much more than just us, you know?
Well, the writers really did their homework. I mean, I've read a number of books about how they did the show, it's kind of remarkable because once they were in the filming season, they only had a week, to do each episode from storyboard to, there it goes, out the door. But they just crammed really a lot of research into that thing. So I appreciated the effort just generally that was put into it.
Oh, yes, definitely. Yeah, Chris Carter did some amazing work on that, I got to say. I've emailed Chris Carter, you guys. I just want everybody to know that. I was trying to get in touch with him, and he's never emailed me back. So if anybody knows Chris, you tell him that my feelings are a little hurt, and and I do want to talk to him at some point. I'd love to get him on the show. It'd be wonderful. So anyhow, okay, Michael, here it comes. This is it. We've got 20 minutes left, and we're going to try to get through these questions as fast as we can without hurting anybody's feelings in the process. So here we go. Sky33 says, does Michael believe UFOs and ETs exist? Now, I think you've already answered that, but you could come up with a synopsis really quick for us here there.
Yeah, for me to take a UFO sighting and assign an alien explanation to it, I would first have to know that there are aliens out there somewhere. And I don't think that that evidence has been produced yet. So for me, when it comes to UFOs, and I realize the subject is, UFO could be 10 different things. But if we're talking about the alien hypothesis, I would need alien life to be something that's known, so that then it gets on the table, and then it becomes part of a strategy for understanding, well, what was this sighting about? Then the alien hypothesis, looks a little bit more credible to me if I know the other element, the alien element.
Excellent. Great. Okay, let's see. Next question. This is also from Sky33. Who does Michael believe authored the Dead Sea Scrolls, Essenes, or many different Jewish sects or groups?
I'm going to be in the second camp because Qumran Qumran is the site where the Dead Sea Scrolls were found. It's essentially a library. So by definition, it's going to be eclectic. Now, there were certainly some documents, and in academic parlance, they're referred to as sectarian documents, sectarian literature. The community itself did produce some of those things, but by and large, they were collecting like copies of the Hebrew Bible and copies of other books that were known in the intertestamental or the Second Temple Jewish period.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, we're getting all kinds of great questions here. Let's see. This one's from Bill Bill NY. As a biblical scholar, does Michael believe that Ezekiel or other references in the Bible may have an ET connection?
No, I don't, and I can survey why real quickly. On one hand, if Ezekiel, the biblical writer, was looking at, again, a oval, silvery object that glowed or something like that, they have the vocabulary to describe something that's circular, something that's, again, silvery, something that's shining, something that's glowing, whatever. But that's not actually what you see in Ezekiel 1. We actually know what Ezekiel was describing in Ezekiel 1. And what he's describing is what's known in academia or called in academia a throne theophany. If you actually look at the narrative, there's a figure seated on a throne that's on a flat, round throne pedestal. The pedestal is supported by these creatures, the four cherubim that are bovine in appearance but with wings. And the reason we know why we know what he was looking at is not only because of the textual description, but also because of iconography from the period, sculptures, engravings, artwork from the periods. I have on my website, if you go up to drmsh.com and in the search engine just type the word Ezekiel in there, you're going to get, again, several things that I posted. And the one that's labeled Part 2 and Part 1 will, again, go through all of what I think about Ezekiel. Now, this is a question where I get to scare sort of traditional, Bible believers here. I'll cut it short by saying this. If you look at the faces, the four faces on the cherubim in Ezekiel 1 and also with Ezekiel 10, they are, not coincidentally, the four cardinal points of the Babylonian zodiac. Now, Ezekiel was in Babylon. He's a captive in Babylon. He's writing to Jews who are in exile in Babylon. And the throne iconography we know from Babylonian examples and other examples. Again, so it has a very Babylonian flavor to it. And then you get this four cardinal points of the zodiac thing. Well, what's the point of the message? It's actually not hard to figure out. The four corners of the earth, again, if you're thinking, in astronomical terms, that sort of thing. It's not Marduk, the god of the Babylonians, who have taken us into captivity. He's not the one on the throne. He's not the one in control of our destiny, time and space and all that stuff. It's actually our God, the God of Israel. We're here because we disobeyed him. We became idolaters. We're being punished. And so Ezekiel's message is, look, God is still the one who is sovereign, even though you're in a terrible situation. You deserve what you're getting, but you're not going to be there forever. You are going to be able to return to your homeland. So be patient and understand why you're here and understand who's still in control. So Ezekiel uses familiar religious, and in this case, Babylonian zodiac, and throne iconography. He uses that imagery to communicate a very specific theological idea to his audience.
Awesome. Great response. I love that. I had no idea that there was Babylonian astrology.
Well, astral theology, again, that's an academic term, is actually an interest of mine. I mean, you run into it in the Bible, you run into it in material between the Testaments, and also a little bit in the New Testament. And we're not talking here about Miss Cleo, or horoscopes in the newspaper. Okay, that is not what they were thinking. Their presumptions were very simple. Genesis 1 describes God as the creator of the stars, the celestial objects that keep times and seasons. He is the one that commands them and controls them. And so the assumption was that he's created them not only to keep track of things, but he might also be able to communicate, again, when we pass from one epoch to another, or information about what he's doing up there in heaven. He can communicate that through the positioning and so on and so forth. Now, the idea that was offensive to Jews and Christians was that the stars themselves controlled individual fate and destiny. That's what we more or less think of as astrology today, and that was offensive because it impinged upon the sovereignty of God. But the idea that God could communicate through the stars and through the heavens and the formations and all that was not rejected. You'll find zodiac mosaics in Jewish synagogues in late antiquity, like mosaic floor decorations and things like that, with the God of Israel in the center controlling the heavens. I mean, that was not an offensive idea. It was taking away sovereignty from God that was the problem.
Exactly. Very interesting. Gosh. Okay, cool. I'm learning so much tonight. Okay, gosh, we've got some really neat questions here. Bill in NY says, is it possible that all religions are rooted in some type of alien contact or intervention that precedes their text? When he says text, I'm assuming something like the Bible or their
sacred texts. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, again, for me to consider that a possibility, I have to know that aliens exist. If I know that aliens exist, then the idea that they could have come here becomes coherent. In other words, I can't use an assumption about them coming here as proof for the fact that they exist. Okay, that's sort of a classic non sequitur. It's a conclusion that doesn't follow. I can't use, evidence and data and conclusions and proof and are different things. We sort of conflate them in discussions like this, but I can't use an argument as a proof, in other words.
Yeah, and the biggest problem we're going to have for the rest of us even asking this question is that was the past. The only thing we've got going for us now to ever know the answers and the truth is now and the future. So, we can sit here until we're green.
Yeah. I mean, going back to Bill's question, the other problem with the alien hypothesis for religion is a lot more simple, and that is you don't really need an external visitation by an alien to get the core religious ideas. All you need is somebody essentially, I don't want to be crude here, but somebody sitting on their butt and looking at the world around them and saying, you know what, I didn't make this. Somebody bigger than me must have made all this and must have made me. And if that's true, then I might be accountable to that individual. And that individual might have a purpose for my life. You see how all these big religious ideas really, derive from simple self-observation and observation of your surroundings. You don't need a spectacular alien intervention to get them, even before we have texts.
That's true. Yep. There we are. Okay, I'm trying to burn through these questions as fast as I can. We got a lot of them tonight. Jimbo Short said, he made a comment, and you can comment on this if you like or not. There is still a 350-ton stone platform made of 3 stones as big as a football field. And we were talking about South America at the time and the stones. What do you say to him about a 350-ton stone platform that is as big as a football field? Do you think your Wallington character could have pulled that off as well?
No, he's referring to Baalbek. And
okay.
if you go up to my site, drmsh.com, and put in Baalbek, it's spelled Baalbek, you'll find an article I did, a post I did on my blog, my Paleobabble blog, where there was a French article written by an engineer who went back into classical sources, Greek and Roman stuff, and reconstructed how objects of this size could be moved again with levers and counterweight and stuff like this. You basically need, I think it was anywhere from 50 to 100 people to do this, but he actually diagrams how an ancient I'm trying to remember the correct, it's not turbine, but the wheel, the round levers that you would need, and you'd need multiple ones to create, again, the force to be able to move one of these objects into position. Now, if you actually go to Baalbek and you look at again, the one that's still in the ground, you can see the hand marks that of how they created it. They weren't using lasers or anything like this. They were pounding it out by hand. This was a hand project. And again, raising obelisks, how this was done is known. Theories, that are quite simple. How to erect them, how to get them, from one end to the other. But if he goes and looks up that article, I was actually able to post that article, the French original, and then a translation of it as well. And going through that, the neat thing about the article is that the guy makes the comment, and I think it's an 18th or 19th century example of an object that weighs more than the stone at Baalbek, how it was moved by hand before there were cranes. So he's again using the example, in that case it's a modern one, but using the same principles, again, for how you would do this without having this advanced machinery. It's really interesting.
Very
it's kind of
cool.
fascinating.
Yeah, and I was just told in the chat room that Baalbek is in Lebanon, and I thought I was referring, or that Jimbo Short was referring to South America, because that's what we were talking about at the time. But hey,
no,
I'll
that's
take
correct.
any place.
Yeah, that's correct. I'd have to know specifically the site, and then I would go look it up in journal literature. And specifically in this case, I'd want to know if the area sort of would allow the same sort of reconstruction as Baalbek does, because Baalbek is, it's the same proximity in terms of weight. When I heard the weight number, that's what popped into my head.
Exactly, and that's what I don't know, because I never really followed these big old rocks.
Send me an email. That would be a good thing to go, look up in the literature.
Exactly. Okay, wonderful. All right. So next question, and this one's kind of a doozy, I think. It's from Bill NY again. He says, does Michael think that the Vatican has had any evidence that may indicate alien interaction in their vaults?
I don't. I don't know why. I don't know how that would be to their advantage or their disadvantage. I mean, I guess disadvantage, you could say, well, it upsets their apple cart, but it really doesn't, because the Vatican, it's like every year they come out and say, hey, we're not hostile to science after all. We've got astronomers that work at Castle Gandolfo. And
Right.
we're part of the search for extraterrestrial life. I mean, if they had this, they could easily, again, I'm not being anti-Catholic when I say this. I'm not a Catholic, but I'm not being anti-Catholic. If they had that sort of information, they would have quite a long time to manipulate it and engineer it and package it however they wanted to package it, so that they could be the ones that announce this and control the conversation. So I think that would be a very simple thing to do for them. They could let out whatever little bit they wanted to let out, and again, frame the discussion so that it worked to their advantage. Again, I'm not saying that they're thinking of doing that or anything like that, or they actually would. All I'm saying is that if you hold that kind of information, you have the power that the Catholic Church does, you can control the discussion.
Exactly. Very interesting. Good answer. I'm telling you. Okay, American Road Warrior, one of my favorite people in the chat room. He doesn't ask questions often, but here's a good one. Could there be a more logical explanation for Sitchin's making the Anunnaki claims?
A more logical explanation
Than that he didn't transcribe them correctly.
Well,
maybe.
my inclination would be you'd have to ask Sitchin, but of course he's passed away.
Yeah,
No,
I
I
know.
mean
We're just
honestly,
about
I'm
a
not.
year or two late, right?
Yeah, well, I'm not. I'm not trying to be funny or flippant with that, but you know, in some respects, he's the only one that could really answer that as to why he would claim what he did. Again, the question, and I'm not sure I'm parsing it correctly, but the question sounds like I'm being asked to guess at Sitchin's motives. I'm not
Right.
sure, but
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
don't
but no.
I don't know of any logical way to just make data up. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah,
I
exactly. And
that's how I'd answer that.
I gotta give
It doesn't exist.
yeah, I gotta give a
Let me just throw one more thing in here. Think
go
about
ahead.
what I'm saying. I'm actually going on a show here that's going to have a lot of reach, and I've been on other shows, lots of other shows, and I've said the same thing. I'm saying that the core alien ideas of Sitchin's mythology are just that. They are mythical. They do not exist in the tablets. How easy would it be to prove me wrong? I mean, think about what I'm saying. All someone
Exactly.
would have to do is come up with one tablet that has the Anunnaki coming from Nibiru or whatever. All it takes is one tablet to have say his alien assertions. And I'm just telling you, I've been saying this for 10 years. Art
Yeah.
Bell asked me if I would debate Sitchin on his show. I said yes. We never heard from Sitchin, okay? Because he's not dumb. I mean, he has nothing to gain by it. But how easy would it be if it existed? And I'm just telling you, it doesn't. That's the reality.
Right. And like I said, when you've done the research, you know what's going on, and I think a lot of people should be listening to you about that.
And
I think that's very important.
More than that, in this matter with the Anunnaki and Sitchin, I've not only looked, I've shown people on my website where they can look to check on me. Run the search, look at the results, get the translations in English. They're all there.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have access to secret information. It's just all there. Go look at it. I'm telling you where to find it. Go look.
Yeah, wonderful. I've only got a couple minutes left. I want to sneak in one more question. I'm sorry, everybody, if I didn't get to everybody's question tonight. But let's see, which one am I going to pick here? Well, here goes another Catholic question. This is from Bill in NY again. Why has Pope Francis given indications or hints of a possible alien arrival, i.e., baptizing aliens if they showed up?
Oh, it's not Pope Francis. It's been the last several popes that have sort of gotten on this bandwagon. And I think it's partly driven by the church. And again, I don't understand it, but the church just seems still so gun shy over this anti-science label because of Galileo. I mean, folks, it's been 400 years, but whatever it is,
Right.
When I was in grad school, again, going back to the Art Bell days, even back then, we're talking 10 years or more, the Vatican came out with the pronouncement that, hey, it's okay to believe in evolution and alien life could have evolved and stuff like this. So you could look at that because they roll this out like every year. And
Yeah.
cynically, I could say, well, maybe it's time for
Michael,
funding for SETI.
I
But
hate
I
to
don't
do
know.
this to you, but yeah, you don't know, and I don't either why
I don't
they're
know why
doing
they
it.
do
But
it.
I do know this: our show has come to an end, and I can't believe it. It's just like I could ask you another 4 hours worth of questions. I got so much to ask you, so I'll have to have you back again sometime. Are you willing to do that?
Oh, sure. You
Oh,
just let me know.
wonderful. Well, everyone, it's been a great ride tonight. Thank you all for being here, and we'll see you next week on the California MUFON Radio Show. Have a great time, everybody. Thanks, Michael. Good night.